Oregon is about to host a big pro golf tournament. Sounds like a great boost to tourism and the local economy, right? Well, it turns out a lot of people do not want it to happen, including a bunch of local mayors.
Beyond the event organizers, have you spoken to anyone who's in support of this?
No, I haven't.
No one.
No one.
The reason? The event is funded by Saudi Arabia.
I'm just not going to be silent whenever Saudi Arabia tries to cleanse its blood-stained hands.
And remember the idea to turn a parking lot at the Portland Expo Center into a place where homeless people could park their cars and RVs? We're checking in to see if any progress has been made.
My sense is that in this city, we have to figure out an answer to this really bad problem.
Here's The Story.
I'm Pat Doris. Welcome to The Story. I'm glad you're here. We've been working all day for this very moment. This is a different sort of news show. We take a deep dive into local stories, and we want to hear from you. We value your interaction and your feedback. Whatever story trips your trigger, send us a comment. I'm interested to see what you think about this very first story. Ready? Let's go. Next month, Oregon is scheduled to host a professional golf tournament. But here's the thing, it's not just any tournament. It will be the first U.S. event for a lucrative new golf league backed by Saudi Arabia. That's a country accused of numerous human rights abuses. And the backlash has been fierce. 11 local mayors say they strongly oppose it and fear there will be protests outside of Pumpkin Ridge, the golf club hosting the event. So why here? Why Oregon? Here's Kyla Boshi.
Nestled among farmland in rural Washington County sits one of Oregon's premier golf clubs. Over the years, Pumpkin Ridge has hosted a U.S. Women's Open, a U.S. Amateur featuring a young Tiger Woods,
another Tiger comeback completed, and with it,
and numerous professional golf tournaments. But now this privately owned golf club in North Plains finds itself tangled in controversy. On June 30th, Pumpkin Ridge is scheduled to be the first U.S. stop for a lucrative new professional golf league backed by the financial arm of Saudi Arabia, a country long accused of human rights abuses.
It's despicable. It's horrible. Absolutely horrible.
North Plains Mayor Terry Lenahan, along with 10 other mayors in Washington County, signed a letter opposing the golf tournament. They're concerned about potential protests and the safety of those living in this normally quiet rural community.
I'm worried about people getting hurt. I'm worried about people and their property getting damaged. I'm worried about the potential of extreme violence.
Saudi Arabia's role in this new golf tour, the Live Golf Invitational Series, has prompted a hailstorm of criticism. The non-governmental organization Amnesty International said the country has demonstrated time and again a flagrant disregard for human rights. And the nonprofit Human Rights Watch describes the country as a pervasive human rights violator, responsible for the 2018 assassination of Washington Post journalist Jamal Khashoggi.
I'm just not going to be silent whenever Saudi Arabia tries to cleanse its blood-stained hands in the fight.
Oregon Senator Ron Wyden adds, the Saudis are also suspected of whisking away its citizens charged with crimes in the U.S., including a 21-year-old college student who disappeared just weeks before his 2017 trial in the hit-and-run death of 15-year-old Fallon Smart in southeast Portland. The fugitive suspect later resurfaced in Saudi Arabia.
They try to cover up, the Saudis do, by misusing athletics in the hope of normalizing their abuses.
Wyden accuses the Saudis of sports washing, a term used to describe big spending on high-profile sporting events to help cleanse a country's image and reputation. They've made investment in soccer, in Formula One, and now golf.
Yep.
Dr. Yoav Dubinsky teaches sports business at the University of Oregon. How intentional is it? I mean, is this a deliberate strategy?
I would say yes. Again, every country is trying to improve its image. There is a goal, and this is very purposeful, and countries are mindful to what they're doing.
Live Golf did not respond to our request for comment. According to its website, tickets for the Pumpkin Ridge tournament start at $70. Corporate sponsors and those who typically promote events like this want nothing to do with it, explained Jim Etzel of Sport Oregon. Your organization plays an important role in kind of bringing in opportunities, events, that type of thing. Did you play any role?
No, none whatsoever, and it wouldn't have been an event we would have pursued. And the primary reason, it just doesn't align with the values of our sports community or, in my opinion, our community at large.
Is there support? Is there anybody out there saying, you know what, it's a good thing this is coming here?
Haven't found one. Yeah, I haven't heard one person that's excited that it's coming here.
So why here? Why Pumpkin Ridge? The golf club is owned by a company called Escalante Golf, based in Fort Worth, Texas, which owns nearly 24 golf courses across the country. 2 of the 4 live golf events in the U.S. are scheduled to be played on Escalante courses. It's not clear how much Escalante is being paid to host the Saudi-backed league. In an email, the company explained, "At this time, we're not available for interviews and do not wish to be included in your story." Beyond the event organizers, have you spoken to anyone who's in support of this?
No, I haven't.
No one.
No one.
Despite growing backlash from local leaders, neighbors, and even club members, several of whom have left Pumpkin Ridge in protest, this controversial golf tournament is still planning to tee it up on June 30th.
Super interesting, Kyle. You mentioned some of the members have left Pumpkin Ridge in protest. How many?
It's not clear. Researching the story, I spoke with 7 current and former members, including a couple people who did leave in protest. They were shocked and frankly outraged by all this. They had no say in the matter, really no vote, and most learned through the media. They suggest overall there's strong opposition among members.
If local leaders are so opposed to it, why can't they just stop it?
It's on private property, so really their hands are tied.
And is this going to happen then?
Yeah, good question. The first event is scheduled for London weekend after next. There have been delays in announcing who's playing, questions about the quality of that field. That, along with the overall controversy surrounding the league and restrictions that prohibit PGA Tour players from playing, it does have a lot of people wondering whether this will even happen.
All right, well, we'll be watching to see. Thank you, Kyle. Fascinating stuff. Roughly 5 weeks ago, I told you about the incredibly slow process of putting in a homeless RV parking site behind the publicly owned Expo Center in North Portland. It's slow despite a poll by the group People for Portland, which shows 63% support for the idea from the public. Tonight, an update. Not much has changed. But in the meantime, Metro, the regional government, which owns but does not control the Expo Center, is now asking developers for ideas on what to do next with the entire place.
The Portland Expo Center is 100 years old. It sits on 53 acres and has hosted everything from swap meets to gun shows and food shows and more. It's a public space, technically owned by the public. The regional government Metro is in charge of the place and this week is putting out requests for proposals from developers. The government wants to know how the land could be put to a better use in the future. Would that include tearing the buildings down? Well, that's unclear. Also unclear why it's taking so long for Metro and a volunteer board that controls the uses of the Expo Center, called MERC, to make a decision on an RV parking site for people who do not have homes.
The Expo Center has a lot of potential.
That was Portland Mayor Ted Wheeler back in early April. The city of Portland has proposed using one or more of these back parking lots behind the Expo Center. The idea would be to get RVs off the streets and out of neighborhoods and give the people living in them a safe place that's monitored 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's something this man, Michael, would appreciate. What do you think of the idea of maybe having a safe RVs parking spot behind the Expo Center?
Yeah, I think that's a good idea.
I met him on a side road about a mile from the Expo Center where 2 RVs are parked and people are living. Michael told me he was staying in a friend's small trailer, but it recently burned. It is now part of the debris there on the side of the road.
I went to bottle drop and came back and it was on fire.
Jasmine Hammond lives here too. She thinks an RV camping place would work. She's not interested in a shelter.
I want to be sheltered away from my friends,
Yeah.
I quite like out here.
Both wonder what sort of rules the place would have.
If it's rules and you can't just, it's not just free RV parking, you can do what you want. It's probably a curfew or some kind of noise thing.
When I reported on the idea 5 weeks ago, I got many emails, some in support and some against the idea. One from Kathy Kaufman against caught my eye. She wrote, "I beg to differ with you about the comment that the Expo spot is not in a neighborhood. For those of us living within easy walking distance of the Expo Center as well as Delta Park, we have been dealing with the homeless issue firsthand." Fair enough. I decided to talk with Kathy in person and hear her complaints.
My first reaction was, oh no, another place with more houseless people.
Kathy lives along the Columbia River, about a mile from the Expo Center. She's lived here for 20 years, and she has seen a change.
We've had a real problem with the Delta area, Delta Park area, for over 2 years, and we've had a lot of crime here in this neighborhood. And so my first reaction was, please don't do this.
Kathy's like many homeowners and renters I've talked with about the homeless, compassionate and also frustrated. And over time, she's now changed her mind. Instead of fighting the idea, she just wants to make sure someone would be at the Expo Center to watch over the people living in their RVs if the site is really developed.
My sense is that in this city we have to figure out an answer to this really bad problem. And we all have to be more open. So I'm not afraid of the people that are going to be moving in there. I just want them to be in a safe place and for us to be safe with them there.
I wanted to talk with both Metro and the city about where things stand today and asked for interviews last week, but neither would talk on camera. When the city last talked to the Merck Commission, Merck had questions for the city, and the city has apparently sent over written answers to those. Merck also wanted to see a good neighbor agreement that would cover security and rules for the site, but today Metro would not even confirm if the document exists for the Expo Center. And later the city told me it does not, that those are not drawn up until the project is actually moving forward. While we're on the topic, let's take a look at the progress of Portland's long-delayed Safe Rest Villages. One of those is also supposed to be a safe parking area specifically for RVs, but different than the one we're talking about at the Expo Center. This one would be a few miles away from Expo off Northeast Sunderland. The city says they are finalizing details with the Portland Bureau of Transportation to prepare the site for development, but no word on when it could actually open. You'll notice here the only green-colored pin on the map is the Queer Affinity Village for people who identify as LGBTQ. That's because it's the only one that's actually open. It happened earlier this month. The village moved to southwest NATO from its old location near the Hawthorne Bridge, so that's probably one of the reasons it was able to open faster than the others. At the end of April, by the way, the city said its goal was to have the village off Multnomah Boulevard open by the end of May. Well, today is the end of May, and it's still not opened yet. But the city says they're working on it. This week, they're supposed to start digging trenches for utilities for the bathroom, shower, laundry, and kitchen areas. As for the other 4 sites, well, those are still in the early planning and permit stages. We've asked the city for another timeline for when those might open. They say they hope to open 1 more site by the end of summer and the rest by the end of the year. So what do you think about that? Continued delays with the Safe Rest Villages that are supposed to help get people out of tents and off the sidewalks. Very little movement on the homeless RV and car parking area behind the Expo Center. Are you okay with this pace? Is that just the way things go? Or are you outraged that something we're being told is an emergency is being treated in a pretty relaxed manner? I'd love to hear your thoughts. Let me know what you're thinking. Send me an email at thestory@kgw.com or call and leave a voicemail. Our phone number is 503-226-5090.
When the story continues,
she's been treated very, very badly by a lot of the staff.
A Washington tribe is trying to bring an orca back to the Pacific Northwest 50 years after she was captured.
This is her home, not in Miami in a cement tank. That's not where she belongs.
Welcome back. Keep sending your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. I just checked. You're already talking to us about the Golf League and about homeless shelters and how long all that takes. And a lot of you are still talking to us about gun violence, which is great. Keep them coming. I'm going to read everyone and listen to every voicemail. If you want to call and leave a voicemail, you can do that at 503-226-5090. In the 1960s and 70s, Washington State was selling off one of its greatest treasures for just a few $100s. Orcas, also known as killer whales, were hunted, then captured, then sent to aquariums and amusement parks around the world. All but one of those captured orcas have now died, and a Northwest tribe now has mobilized to fight for its return. Here's PJ Rondawa from our sister station in Seattle.
Welcome. We're the Lactamish people.
On the shore of the Salish Sea.
These are the native waters of Quethalmachan, orcas.
Members of the Lummi Nation and others pray for the return of someone they consider family. A southern resident orca that was captured from these waters more than 50 years ago.
This is her home, not in Miami in a cement tank. That's not where she belongs. We ache for our relative. So it was important today to gather to send prayers to Scully Chucktanut to let her know we're coming for her.
The Lactamish people call her Scully Chucktanut. But here in Miami, where she's been held in captivity for the last 50 years, she's Lolita. She's legal property of the Miami Seaquarium.
When you are close to her, you can feel the sadness that she's just hanging on. It is just taking a lot longer than we had ever hoped.
Scully Chucktanut's story begins in 1970, around the time King 5 began investigating orca captures in Puget Sound.
Had aircraft flying over the San Juans to spot them, boats with explosives to separate the adults from the babies.
It was during one of these captures, Scully Chucktanut was violently taken from her family in Washington's Penn Cove. She was just 4 years old.
They only wanted the babies. She is the longest living orca in captivity. When she was brought to a pen on the dock by the harbor, she was crying. Her mother was crying. People around Penn Cove, the older people can still hear the cries, the screams.
The whole capture itself, how traumatizing would that have been?
Terribly traumatic. Pain on the side of their heads when those bombs are going off.
Howard Garrett, co-founder of the ORCA network, showed us photos from some of those whale captures in the early 70s.
The older females would gather around the young ones and try to protect them. They knew what was happening.
Since her capture, Scully Chucktanut has lived mostly alone here at the Miami Seaquarium.
It's shallow. There's nowhere in her tank that's deep enough that she can dive.
Ellie Kinley and Raynell Morris are Lummi tribe members who have visited Scully Chucktanut in Miami.
You know you're not alone.
You'll see that there's 2 umbrellas for the trainers that are working with her, but yet there's no shade for her.
According to a 2021 inspection report, she's fed poor quality rotten food. The water in her tank is dirty, and her trainers disregarded veterinary instructions to make her perform despite injuries.
This is an extreme case of torture and abuse. She's been treated very, very badly by a lot of the staff.
In March, the Dolphin Company purchased the Miami Seaquarium. As a condition of the sale, the company had to retire Scully Chucktanut. For now, she remains in Miami. The company did not return our request for comment.
She has now gone from the corporate books from an asset to a liability. So that's a huge incentive for them to come to the table and want to partner with us.
Scully Chucktanut's advocates are working to get an independent veterinarian to assess her condition and determine whether she could safely make the 3,000-mile journey back home.
It's been done since the 1960s. Hundreds of times, orcas have been transported by plane.
First, Scully Chucktanut would be coaxed into a custom-made stretcher and lifted out of her Miami aquarium with a crane. The 20-foot, 7,000-pound orca would then be lowered into a small container not much bigger than herself, filled with ice water to prevent overheating. From there, she'll be loaded onto a cargo plane for a 6-hour trip to the Bellingham airport. Next, onto a barge, which will transport her to her ancestral waters in the Salish Sea. Her new home will look very different than the cement aquarium she's spent the last half-century in. The plan, created in collaboration with wildlife researchers and marine mammal veterinarians, calls for a netted underwater pen, 250 feet long, 100 feet wide, and 30 feet deep in fresh ocean water.
The scent of the cedar brings the salmon home. And that scent travels across the water to her. She's home. It's calling her home, like it calls the salmon home.
Here at home and in Miami, a special call from her family.
And when we went to Miami in 2020, we brought our cedar with us to put it into the water outside of her tank. So Skelly Chucktonut would smell that cedar. Skelly Chucktonut! And know that's home. Skelly Chucktonut! She's 56. She has 37 plus beautiful years left of her life. When she comes home, she'll feel comforted. Her struggle's over. I can see it.
On the horizon, advocates hope for a reunion. A half-century in the making.
And we'll be watching to see how that goes. When we return, a trip back in time. We'll go into the vault to remember the VANPORT community and the devastating flood that wiped it out more than 70 years ago. When the story continues. "74 years ago, on Memorial Day 1948, Oregon's second largest city was destroyed in a massive flood. It was called VANPORT, and it was located where Delta Park is in North Portland today. Let's take a look back at this piece of history in the KGW vaults.
The city of VANPORT was built during World War II in North Portland, where Delta Park is today. At the time, it was the second largest city in Oregon and the largest federal housing project in the country, home to 40,000 people. About 40% of the population was black. Most people worked in the Kaiser shipyards for the war effort, but a lot of them left town when the war ended. By 1948, the population had been cut in half. That is when disaster struck. On Memorial Day, the Columbia River breached the railroad levee, spilling into VANPORT and destroying the city. At least 17 people died.
It was the worst weather disaster in the United States in 1948. And so it had national and international news. President Truman came and he said we should rebuild it. However, the city fathers at that time did not want it rebuilt. They wanted VANPORT essentially gone and erased, which is part of the reason that so few people know about VANPORT today.
But the city left a legacy behind, helping integrate Portland and Oregon, a state that not long before had few black people due to its black exclusion laws.
These were strangers, 40,000 strangers who created a community. And when that community was disrupted, they brought that community feeling right into Portland and changed it from extremely conservative to what we have now.
The issues of home, displacement, and community that VANPORT really helps us dig into are still clearly issues that the whole country and the city of Portland are facing. I mean, the city of VANPORT was built because there was not enough housing.
The VANPORT Mosaic Festival is held each year in May, complete with a day of remembrance to talk about the history of VANPORT and what our community can continue to learn from it.
Amazing times. Keep sending your questions and comments to the story at kgw.com. Still ahead, how you can help your community. For this week's Hey Help campaign, we're asking you to donate to PDX Saints Love. They help people experiencing homelessness and addiction in Portland. The group puts on community fairs where they offer things like showers, haircuts, clothing, hot food, and other resources. If you want to help out, just hold your phone's camera up to the QR code there on your screen, or you can go to kgw.com/heyhelp. Well, that's the end of our show, but before we go, if you like to run, come on down tomorrow morning and meet me at the downtown foot traffic store. We're meeting at 6:45 in the morning, leaving about 7. We're going to run easy along the waterfront for maybe an hour. I hope you can make it. In the meantime, thanks for watching. And remember, the story, our story, well, that never ends. I'll see you tomorrow night.
This is KGW News at 6:30.